An antimeme is an idea with self-censoring properties, an idea by which its intrinsic nature discourages or prevents people from spreading it. Antimemes are real. Think of any piece of information which you wouldn't share with anybody. Passwords, taboos, and dirty secrets. Or any piece of information which would be difficult to share even if you tried. Complex equations, very boring passages of text, large blocks of random numbers, and dreams. But anomalous antimemes are another matter entirely. How do you contain something you can't record or remember? How do you fight a war against an enemy with effortless, perfect camouflage, when you can never even know that you're at war? Welcome to the Antimemetics division. No, this is not your first day. Item number SCP-055. Object Class Keter. Special Containment Procedures. Object is kept within a 5x5 by 2.5 meter square room constructed with cement of 50 centimeter thickness, with a Faraday cage surrounding the cement walls. Access is via a heavy containment door measuring 2 by 2.5 meters, constructed on bearings to ensure the door closes and locks automatically unless held open deliberately. Security guards are not to be posted outside SCP-55's room. It is further advised that all personnel maintaining or studying SCP objects in the vicinity try to maintain a distance of at least 50 meters from the geometric center of the room, as long as this is reasonably practical. Description: SCP-55 is a self-keeping secret or antimeme. Information about SCP-55's physical appearance as well as its nature, behavior, and origins is self-classifying. To clarify, how Site-19 originally acquired SCP is unknown. When SCP-55 was obtained, and by whom, is unknown. SCP-55's appearance is unknown. It is not indescribable or indivisible. Individuals are perfectly capable of entering SCP-55's container and observing it, taking mental or written notes, making sketches, taking photographs, and even making audio and video recordings. An extensive log of such observations is on file. However, information about SCP-55's physical appearance leaks out of the human mind as soon after an observation. Individuals tasked with describing SCP-55 afterwards find their minds wandering and lose interest in the task. Individuals tasked with sketching a copy of a photograph of 55 are unable to remember what the photograph looks like, as are researchers overseeing these tests. Security personnel who have observed 55 via closed-circuit television cameras emerge after a full shift exhausted and amnesiac about the events of the previous hours. Who authorized the construction of 55's containment room, why it was constructed this way, or what the purpose of the described containment procedures may be are all unknown. Despite 55's container being easily accessible, all personnel at Site-19 claim no knowledge of 55's existence when challenged. All of these facts are periodically rediscovered, usually by chance readers of this file, causing a great deal of alarm. This state of concern lasts minutes at most before the matter is simply forgotten about. A great deal of scientific data has been recorded from 55, but cannot be studied. At least one attempt has been made to destroy 55, or possibly move it from containment site at 19 to another site, meeting failure for unknown reasons. 55 may present a major physical threat, and indeed may have killed many hundreds of personnel, and we would not know it. Certainly prevents a gigantic memetic mental threat, hence its Keter classification. Document 55-1. An analysis of 55. The author puts forward the hypothesis that SCP-55 was never formally acquired by Redacted, and is in fact an autonomous and/or remotely controlled agent inserted at Site-19 by an unidentified third party for one or all of the following purposes: to silently observe or interfere with the activities of Site-19, to silently observe or interfere with the activities of at other SCP locations, to silently observe or interfere with the activities of humanity worldwide, to silently observe or interfere with other SCP objects, to silently observe or interfere with Redacted. No action or counter of any of these potential threats is suggested, or indeed theoretically possible. Addendum A. Hey, if this thing really is an anti-beam, why doesn't the fact that it's an anti-beam get wiped? We must just be wrong about that somehow. Wait a minute. What if we were to keep notes about what it isn't? Would we remember those? Written by Bartholomew Hughes of the NSA. Document 55-2. Report of Dr. John Marachek. Survey Team 19-55-127BXE was successfully able to enter SCP-55's container to ascertain the appearance and, to some degree, the nature of the object. Notes were taken according to the project methodology, see redacted, after which the container was sealed again. Excerpt from a transcript of the personal debriefing follows. Okay, I'm going to ask you some questions about number 55 now. Number what? SCP Object 55, the object you just examined. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't think we have a 55. Okay then, I would like you to tell me what you've been doing for the past 2 hours. Subject appears uncomfortable. I don't know. Okay then. Do you remember that we all agreed it wasn't spherical? Wasn't... Oh, right! It isn't round at all. Object 55 isn't round. So, you remember it now? Well, no. I mean, I don't know what it is. But I know there is one. It's something you can't remember, and it's not a sphere. Wait a minute. What's not a sphere? Object 55. Object what? Doc, do you remember agreeing that something wasn't shaped like a sphere? Oh, right! It appears that to be possible to remember what SCP-55 is not, negation's a fact, and to repeatedly deduce and its existence from these memories. Personnel involved in Survey 19-55-127-BXC reported moderate levels of disorientation and psychological trauma associated with the cycles of repeated memory and forgetfulness SCP-55. However, no long-term behavioral or health problems were observed, and psych assessments of survey personnel showed that consistent reports of this distress faded over time. Recommendations: it may be worthwhile to post at least one staff member capable of remembering the existence of SCP-55 to each critical site. Next up we need to talk about 55. Can I smoke? This time the receptionist narrows her eyes at Marion. No, she says. You? No. You can't smoke anywhere on Site 200. Just because it's an administration building doesn't mean we don't have lungs. Or labor laws. Marion notices the exasperation on the young woman's face. I've asked you before, haven't I? Twice in the last quarter hour, the receptionist says. You really must need a smoke. She's generally puzzled at the repeated question, and she's doing a bad job of concealing her puzzlement. You think this is like Memento, don't you? Marion offers charitably. You think I have no long-term memory, and if I stay in one place for too long, I forget why I'm there. The receptionist is only just old enough to remember the film. I guess? Marion smiles sympathetically and shakes her head. It's nothing so simple. Minutes pass. She toys obsessively with her lighter, turning 50 this year and slowly graying, on her way out of petite towards little old lady. In her bag, her phone beeps because it's time for a pill, but she tells her to remind her later. There's a slight tremble in her fingers. Not that it's age-based. It's just ordinary nerves. She's nervous because she's to meet an O5. And O5s are scary. O5s never want to see you for a small thing. It's the end of the world. Or nothing. Finally, 40 minutes late, the door to the inner office opens. 4 or 5 high-ranked Foundationers spill out carrying laptops or briefcases. As a group, they head straight past reception and out to cars which are waiting. Marion recognizes a few of the faces. From the Site 19 director, the head recruiter for the Western Europe. None of them glance in her direction. Once they're gone, 05-8, its assistant, pokes his head out the door. He's 20-something, improperly useful, like a teenager stuffed into one of his dad's business suits. His haircut is barely regulation. In one hand, he holds a tablet computer showing the boss's day planner, and it's packed. The man evidently does not sleep. Marion, you can come through now. The office doors close behind them with unusually heavy mechanical clunk, as if the whole thing is part of a machine built into the office's walls. While Marion takes the indicated chair and sets her bag down, the assistant turns and does some confusing additional things to the door, causing it to make several further strange noises. O5s have non-trivial privacy and security requirements. The office is spacious, but somehow contrives to be dark despite 2 big corners of a window and broad daylight outside. The walls are all bookshelves and dark wood paneling. Perfectly stylish, but a little worn and not yet old enough to be fashionable again. As for the fellow behind the desk, well, an O5 never looks like you imagine. Marion takes a deep breath. So what's the topic? All I've got was a meeting invitation. No agenda or subject. I mean, an O5 says jump and you jump, but... Looking to her right, she notices that the assistant, without saying anything or making any undue noise, has set his tablet down on the table, produced a gun, and aimed it at her head. Marion stops talking. She sits still in her chair for a little while, absorbing the change of pace and letting her heart rate rise to a hummingbird's, and then start to flatten again. Okay, she hazards. She licks her lips and grips the armrest, otherwise staying perfectly still, waiting for another prompt. The assistant's face is totally neutral now. Like this is just how meetings go. Maybe it is for people here. Who are you? 05-8 asks her. Marion blinks. What? Oh God. Let me rephrase. Marion Wheeler, 49, with loving husband and 2 boys in tow. Likes camping, hiking, ornithology, boring mother with perfect airtight background and financials, as far as back as we can examine. And you've got full foundation credentials which we've never issued, including access to a list of installations and rooms which... Some of these locations don't exist, or were torn down decades ago. At least one hasn't been built yet, and yet you've got the front door key to it. That's before we get you your SCP access control lists, which I can only term as egregious. So you're a spy, and your objectives are misaligned with ours. Clay wanted to cut XI3... Wait, no, it's... Yeah, cut Z3 loose on you. I was able to bring him around, and I talked to him face to face. I thought there was a slim chance that if we locked you in a bomb-proof room and asked politely, you'd have the good sense to spare yourself the rest. Marion had long since stopped listening. You dullard, she says now she can finally speak. I'm your chief of Antimemetics. We don't have an Antimemetics division, Clay says. Yes, you do. We do. 05-8 says, we have a Memetics division, Telecontainment division, Fire Services, Ops A, Ops B, Personnel, D Personnel, and 24 others. We don't have an Anti-Memetics division. Do we have the Irony division? Marion asks. She hesitates hopefully. No? Alright, well, try this. Why do you think the Anti-Memetics division would show up in the listing? This is just a cover story, Clay says to 05-8, not taking his eyes off Marion. It's a good one, but she has it worked out in advance. Clay, lose the piece, says 05. Grudgingly, Clay does so. Marion relaxes fractionally. There are SCPs with dangerous memetic properties, she says. These are contagious concepts which require containment, just like any other physical threat. They get into your head and ride your mind to each other's minds, right? Right, 05-8 says. He could name a score of SCP fitting this description without even thinking. There are SCPs with anti-memetic properties, Marion goes on. There are ideas which cannot be spread. There are entities and phenomena which harvest and consume information, particularly information spread about themselves. You take a Polaroid photo of one, it'll never develop. You write a description of one with a pen on paper and hand it to someone, but what you've written turns out to be hieroglyphs, and nobody can understand them, not even you. You can look directly at one, and it won't be invisible, but you'll still perceive nothing there. Dreams you can't hold on to, and secrets you could never share, and lies, and living conspiracies. It's a conceptual subculture of ideas consuming other ideas, and sometimes segments of a reality. Sometimes people. Which makes them a threat. That's all there is to it, really. Anti-memes are dangerous, and we don't understand them. Therefore, they are part of the problem. Hence my division. We can do sideways thinking that there's needed to combat something which literally can eat your combat training. 05-8 stares at her for a long moment. Clay fidgets, disliking and distrusting the story, but the 05 seems more open to the concept. Name one, he says. Name an anti-memetic SCP. SCP-55, Marion says promptly. There is no SCP-55, Clay retorts. Again, yes there is. There isn't, Clay asserts. SCP numbers aren't assigned sequentially, there are gaps. That number hasn't been assigned. It's not superstition. We have enough to be concerned about with... We have SCP-666, SCP-13, but there's no SCP-1. There's no SCP-55. Clay, 058 says, you should look at this. He turns his monitor so Clay can see the file that he has just retrieved. Clay bends over and reads it from top to bottom. Stunned, he scrolls back and reads it all a second time. But the file is dated from 2008. It's got all the right flags and signatures. It's keyed and coded. It's real. You've seen this before? Clay asked him. Never in my life, 058 says. As far as I can remember anyways. On the other hand, the content is accurate. Both of us have probably seen it dozens of times. Clay glares at Marion. This isn't possible. Marion nearly spits. For Christ's sake, Clay, how long have you been working here? But if the SCP is this powerful, begins. Yes? Who wrote the file? 05 finishes. And as for that matter, how was the interview conducted? And who's Bartholomew Hughes? And most importantly, how do you, Mrs. Wheeler, retain the knowledge of any of this? Bar Hughes wrote the file. He's dead. What happened to him? You don't want to know. There's a very long pause while 050-8 and his assistant react to this. In fact, they pass through a long, discrete sequence of reactions. Indignation at the seeming rudeness, confusion at Wheeler's incaution in front of sinister superiors, surprise at the magnitude of the claim, pure disbelief, comprehension, and finally horror. What, 05 asked carefully, would happen if we did know? Well, it would happen to you as well. As for the rest of your questions, we manage that pharmaceutically. Do you know we have a Class A amnestics for people who very badly need to forget things? Of course you do. Who could forget about Class A amnestics? Well, in Antimemetics, we have a different pill. Those who need to remember things that would otherwise be impossible to remember. Amnestics. Class W, X, Y, and Z. Same Greek root as the word mnemonic. The M is silent. In her bag, their phone beeps again. With a nod of approval from the 05, Marion reaches into her bag and turns her phone off, acknowledging that the prompt this time instead of postponing it. She pulls a blister pack from another pocket and pops a pill out. It's hexagonal and green. She holds it up, satisfied to see the flicker of recognition in the 05-8's face. He begins putting it back together. Marion says, these are Class W amnestics. The weakest, suitable for continual use. 2 pills a day. Go down to the site pharmacy and ask. The pharmacist will claim they don't stock any such thing. They are misremembering. Tell them to double check. 05-8 size. And now I think I get it. I see why we're having this conversation at all. Yes, Marion says, popping a second pill out and handing it over to him. It's because you missed a dose. You're supposed to take these. Same as me and everybody on my staff. It's the only way we can work. You forget to take the pills, and then you forget to take all the information the pills were helping you retain. You forget why you were taking them, you forget who gave them to you, you forget where to get more. You forget about me and my entire department. And now I have to bring you up to speed. And if I take this, 05-8 says, I'll remember this whole conversation and we won't have to have it again? Hopefully not, Marion says. Clay pipes up. Should I be taking those? Sorry, kiddo. Need to know. Maybe when you're no 05 yourself. He swallows the pill. Marion swallows her too. So what is SCP-55? 05-8 asks. SCP-55 is nothing. Now, Marion says, now relaxing entirely. SCP-55 is described in the file. A powerful information autosuppressor. As far as experimentation has uncovered, it can only be defined to negative terms. We can only record what it isn't. We know it isn't safe, or Euclid. We know it isn't round, or square, or green, or silver. And we know it isn't stupid. And we know it isn't alone. But what we do know is that it's weak. It's weak because it's the only antimemetic agent in our possession, which has a physical entry in the files. We have paper records of the thing. We have containment procedures. It's not safe, which means it's dangerous, but it's contained. 05-8 blinks. You have procedures? Where? Marion points at her head. Then how many other anti-memes are there? How much more dangerous do they get? 10 that I know of, Marion says. Statistically, probably at least 5 more that I don't know of. This does not count the anti-meme entities freely roaming the halls, not under containment. There are at least 2 in this room with us right now. Don't look. I said don't look. It's pointless. 05-8 does an impressive job of controlling himself, keeping his attention focused on Marion. Clay doesn't fare so well and quickly sweeps the whole room, checking behind his back, making an ass of himself, and essentially he finds nothing. He looks baffled. There's an invisible monster which follows me around and likes to eat my memories, Marion explains patiently. SCP-4987. Don't look it up, it's not there. I've learned to manage with it. It's like a demeaning pet. I produce tasty memories on purpose so it doesn't eat something important, like my passwords or how to make coffee. And what's the other one, Clay asks? Another nod from 05-8. Marion goes into her bag again. This time, she pulls a gun and shoots Clay twice in the heart. More gassed than in pain, Clay collapses sharply against the bookcase behind him. Pulling his head around to face Marion, he manages. How did you know? Marion stands, aims more carefully, and shoots him a 3rd time. This time in the head. 05-8, again, does an impressive job of not reacting. That's Clay's gun, he deadpans. You stole it from him. It's tricky to steal a firearm this heavy from someone without them noticing, Marion explains. Unloading it and carefully setting it down. But stealing a firearm and then stealing their memory of the theft is a little easier. Like I said, a pet. Some pets are dumb enough that they can be trained. Yes, Sophie says evenly. That much I'd guess. Why? Because you were supposed to be taking Class W amnestics, Marion says. You can't skip a dose of Class W amnestic. I've tried. You can postpone a dose, but you can't forget unless someone actively prevents you from taking it. There's only one person who could get close enough to you to do that, and that's your assistant. And remember when I asked you how long you'd been working here? You didn't answer. I thought you were being rhetorical. He doesn't work here, Marion says. He's an anti-meme. Since when do you have an assistant? You don't have an assistant, Brent. Look at this office. It's got 1 desk. You've got a receptionist outside. She's the one who screens your calls and schedules your meetings. Where does Clay even sit? Where does he even fit? Don't blame yourself. You're human, and these things are redactions incarnate. You need to think like a space alien to get around them. 05-8 asks a question which in any other workplace would be absurd. Is he dead? Maybe. I can't put his corpse in a research queue and see what we can do once we open him up. There's duality here, though. They're like parallel universes sharing the same space. It's conceptual versus concrete, figurative versus physical. It's a very unusual thing to cross over. I don't know what Clay was, but he had a human body, which instantly makes him weird, even by our standards. As ever, the search for a stalemate continues. I will let you know if we get any closer. Any side effects of the pills, 05 asks? Nausea and dramatically increased risk of pancreatic cancer, Marion says. And very bad dreams. Introductory to Antimemetics by Quantum. Junior researcher Kim has been working for the Foundation for all of 4 hours, and he feels pulverized, as if an anvil were dropped on his head in the first introductory lecture. It's lunchtime, and he's found a corner so far back in the cafeteria that nobody bothers him, where he can chew and swallow non-anomalous food, drink apocalyptically strong coffee, and he digests the hard lessons of the morning. On his Foundation-provided phone, he pages fretfully through the few SCP files which he has clearance. Most of them have to be jokes. That's how they read. Like very bad, dark, frightening jokes. Kim's one of 11 junior researchers in the new intake, and the other 10 are sitting in a separate group at a separate table, chatting animatedly to one another. There are a few instructors here and there, munching sandwiches. Other than them, the cafeteria, large enough to seat 200 people or more, is deserted. To Kim, that seems odd. Site 41 is large. 3 skulking buildings with a significant basement space buried casually in the forests of central Colorado. Where is everybody? A man in a great suit walks into the cafeteria. He makes eye contact with Kim and strides purposefully over. The man's suit is sharp enough to cut. He wears a tie pin and a platinum wristwatch as big as a brick. It looks badly misplaced. Site 41 is a working site. There's training, education, research, development, analytics, and even the containment of a very few safe SCPs going on here. The executive shouldn't be here, so what is he? Lost exec, trying to look for the helipad? Or a research or instructor, dressing for the job he wants, not the job he has. Hell of a first day, the man says, holding out a hand. Alistair Gray, with an E. Kim. Paul Kim. Good to meet you. What accent is that, if you don't mind me asking? Kim blinks. New York, he says. I'm from New York. Are you the site director? You seem on edge. Well, that figures, doesn't it? Kim asks. You know how that intro goes. It's like an atom bomb to the ego. I just had almost everything I know overturned, and it turns out I spent my entire adult life being protected from dangerous knowledge? As if the whole outside world is a ball pit for under sevens. Stepping out has been humiliating to start with, and he blinks again. Hey, what do you do here exactly? You didn't answer my question. You didn't answer mine, Gray says. Of course I did, Kim says. I'm from... Then he stops. His train of thought running off at the end of the track. His train of thought running off the end of the track, into the air. It's on the tip of his tongue, the answer to Gray's question. But he can't get his words out. That's weird, he says, shaking his head. At this point, he also notices that Gray isn't wearing his badge. This could be an honest mistake, albeit an extremely serious one. But surely execs don't get to the executive level without being scrupulously correct in everything they do. Who are you? Kim asks again. Your life story was fascinating. What? You spoke 4 languages, Gray tells him. 1 now, and soon 0. Too huge an intellect to specialize. Your education was a fusion of biochemistry and comprehensive literature. You felt as if you'd die if you couldn't find more foreign thoughts to cram in that head. You've been all over the world, hungry. And every country you've ever been in was like landing in another planet. You toy with the anthropology, but there's too much for one human race to ever understand, let alone one human. There's too much human race. We should pare it down a little. Kim nods. Would you excuse me for just 1 second? He gets up and hurries to another table. To the instructor whom he met earlier that day. When Kim gets close, he feels a kind of staticky sensation building up. He tries to shake her shoulder and succeeds in moving it a little. But it's like reaching through tar. There's a problem. There's an intruder. I think it might be an SCP. Doc, look at me. Hello? She doesn't react. He tries to gaggle a fellow newcomers as well. They keep chattering and hypothesizing, oblivious to him shouting and clapping in their ears. Hey, people, listen to me! Listen to me! No! No, no, no! He looks back. Gray has stood up and started moving towards him, still with that confident smile. And there's definitely something wrong with him now. He's visible through tables, like an augmented reality holo projection jammed inside Kim's eyeballs. Kim's realizing there's a stab of fear that he can even see Gray when he blinks. His eyelids close, but Gray is still there. An apparition in what for all of Kim's life has been totally personal, private darkness. The only way he can avoid seeing Gray is to turn away. And even then, he feels a radioactive prickling in the back of his eyeballs. Kim tries to phone one of the newbies. The phone in the newbie's pocket rings. And other than that, nothing happens. Nobody reacts. That doesn't make sense, Kim says. Do you remember your father? Gray says. I never knew my father, Kim says, edging away. Mom raised me. Gray's white smile is a fixture. These people loved your perspective. They're going to put you to work on an anomalous anti-meme. They don't remember you exist. You don't. Kim says, mainly to himself, there aren't any dangerous SCPs on site. This is a safe site. So either you're not dangerous or nobody knows you exist. And if nobody knows you exist, that means you're either brand new or... you're... what, an anti-meme? I love a first day, Gray says. Are you sentient? You seem on edge, Gray says. Kim bolts. He exits the cafeteria, turns a corner, and runs 10 or 11 paces down the corridor to where there's an elevator. He stabs the down button and waits. The elevator door is highly polished, reflective. Kim catches sight of the face and the mirrored surface and nearly falls over from shock. Because it's a face he has never seen before. And apparently it's his own. Jesus, oh no, no, no! What the hell? What the hell? Gray comes around the corner. Still only strolling, just as the elevator cracks open. Kim dives in and punches the lowest floor. Basement level 8. It's instinctive, although he could rationalize the decision in retrospect. He can't just get in his car and drive. It's better if Gray stays on site than to set loose in a rational reality. And it's better to do that if Kim retreats to the lowest, darkest corner of the site, which he has access. Then waits for Gray. Then locks all the doors behind them and waits to die. The elevator starts descending, and the apparition of Gray, still visible through the doors and floors, disappears upwards, shrinking with distance and perspective, but smiling broadly down at Kim. Kim paces in the elevator. I don't remember what my face looks like. It's said to have eaten all my secondary languages, but I don't remember learning anything other than English, so it's eating my memories. It's consuming information, and I can't contact anybody directly, which means I'm on my own. I'm not trained for this. He hammers his head once against the elevator wall and stares at his shoes. But I don't know that. What if I've been trained, but I don't remember any of my training anymore? What if I've been working here for years and I only think this is my first day? What if I've met this thing before? What if everybody on the site has met it multiple times and nobody remembers? Is this what an anti-meme is? Kim remembers the near-empty cafeteria, the miles of totally unoccupied corridors and vacant offices and lab space. Maybe it's not just eating my memories. Maybe it eats people whole. Removed them completely from history. Maybe it's been haunting this site for years, and that's why this site's so empty. Because it's nearly finished exterminating us all. I need to get help. I need to warn somebody. How? I can't talk to people. I can't phone them. Should I write an SCP? But surely somebody's already thought of that. He pulls his phone out he pulls out the listing and nearly 10,000 SCP's entries. And 100 of them are tagged as Antimemetics alone. Kim clears his mind. Gray. With an E. Grey 4739. SCP-4739. Object Class Keter. Special Containment Procedures. I'm disregarding the format because time is a factor. If you're reading this, you've already been isolated from the Foundation at large. Attempts to signal for help are futile. You are now inside SCP's 4739's gullet. After ingestion and prior to digestion, you will need to get to Lab S041-B08-053 as soon as possible, and continue to research until you find a way to stop or kill Gray before it kills you. Don't read the rest until you're in the elevator. Description: at the moment the elevator opens at basement level 8, Alistair Gray is waiting. Still smiling, and disarmingly he steps forward. Desperate, Kim hurls his phone overarm at the creature's forehead. It's a solid chunk of metal, and it's a dead hit. Gray reels backwards and cracks his skull against the wall. By the time he recovers, Kim is out of the sight, herring away down the left corridor, just echoing fading footsteps on concrete. 2 45-degree turns, and room 53 is in sight. The door at its furthest end, it looks like a submarine bulkhead. Kim spots the keypad from the way out. 4 digits. Press 4739, and it works first time. The bulkhead mechanism takes an agonizing seconds to open up. Come on, come on, come on.
Do you remember your own mother?
He hears Gray calling down the corridor. I never knew my parents. I was an orphan. Kim hisses under his breath. For a split second, he wonders what Gray might actually mean by that, but he doesn't have time to dwell on it. The bulkhead opens. Kim slides in and pulls it closed behind him, locking the mechanism up again as if that'll buy him even 1 second. The lab inside is sizable, windowless of course, and stacked up to the ceiling with a jumble of equipment which Kim hardly recognizes. There are pieces of thick, shattered glass underfoot. In the corner, there's a computer terminal, locked. Kim unlocks it, and there's the same entry waiting for him. Description: SCP-4739 is a powerful, slow-acting antimemetic kill agent taking the appearance of a male Caucasian business exec calling him Alistair Gray. SCP-4739 is attracted to dense clusters of organically stored information. Essentially, extremely knowledgeable, complicated, interesting people. SCP-4739 isolates its victim from the outside world by enveloping them in an antimemetic field, which makes it impossible for the victim, or anything done by the victim, to be perceived or remembered. SCP-4739 then consumes the victim's memories and knowledge until they become vegetative and die. This process takes between 15 minutes and 2 hours and is described as being like Alzheimer's disease and fast forward. SCP-4739 is not to believe to be sentient, although it imitates the behavior of a sentient being to the extent that it can appear sentient to the inattentive. Its victims are unable to move and act freely since it's almost impossible to escape once caught, or to signal for help. Communications such as written notes, graffiti, and electronic mail do get sent and persist in reality, but SCP-4739's effect spreads with each message, making it impossible for an external observer to perceive the message until such a time as SCP-4739 catches them too. The SCP entry, which you are currently reading, is created and maintained by victims of SCP-4739 because it is only visible to victims of 4739. If you are reading this SCP entry, 4739 has caught you. You are now isolated from the Foundation at large and constitute an effective Foundation of 1. You have between 15 minutes and 2 hours to reach Site 41, Basement Level 8, Laboratory 53. Familiarize yourself with the existing research and continue this research until you find a way to contain or decommission SCP-4739. Or, more likely, die. Your field of expertise is not related to antimemetic containment. We sincerely apologize and advise you start learning fast. SCP-4739 has consumed redacted Foundation researchers since we started counting on August 3rd, 2013. If you are reading this entry for the first time, please add a mark. We estimate at least 50% of the victims never made it this far in the database entries, so the true victim count is more than twice this figure. But how do I kill it? Kim screams. He scrolls through the research, which is chaotic and haphazardly arranged because nobody has found spare seconds to sort it out. There are dozens of separate lines of research contributed in patchworks by succession of victims, all ending with variations on the same final line. I'm going to try to kill X. If you're reading this, X didn't work, and I'm dead. Which means approach X is a dead end, and you have to think of something else. He reads, nobody has succeeded in physically engaging with Gray. Nobody can stall it, evade it, slow it down, reason with it, or redirect it to some other target. People have tried poisoning their memories with indigestible ideas, drip-feeding their memories to Gray to slow them down, replacing their memories faster than Gray can eat them up, and force-feeding Gray too many memories at once to overfeed him and blow him up. They've tried committing suicide by Class A amnestic overdose. None of it worked. More than 100 people, most of them apparently processing doctorates, have slid into the maws of this thing, fought briefly, and, with a greater and or lesser degree of dignity, died. There are no remaining untried threads. I'm fucked. Kim concludes. He glances up. Gray's not in the room yet, but Kim can see him strolling down the latched stress of the corridor. He's a totally intangible being. Physical obstructions are irrelevant to him. He can't be hurt. Kim clutches his pocket, where he used to keep his phone. Wait a second. He scrolls again. He finds 3 or 4 sad, desperate wretches who died confronting Gray physically. Combat knife and Glock, baseball bat. Kim looks up and checks the room. Sure enough, the bat's there, rolled under a table. One man, an elderly botanist far out of his depth, said he was going to try whatever he could to find what the heaviest thing. That explains the shattered CRT television and the tight layer of thick glass on the floor near the bulkhead. There's even CCTV footage of the botanist's attempt. He accomplishes literally nothing. Gray is a holographic ghost, and the CRT drops right through him, imploding where it hits the floor at Gray's feet. The botanist spends the rest of the video running around huddled in a corner, gradually losing his mind while Gray watches placidly. The difference being, Kim realizes with his eyes boggling, a phone is a solid brick full of information, and before me, nobody tried using information as a missile. Kim searches for experiments, several of them scattered where the victims tried to divert Gray to a different data source. The general idea seemed to be overload Gray by pointing him at something containing too much information. The internet. Or the terabit feed from a live particle accelerator. A stack of hard drives containing the first few quadrillion binary digits of pi, but nobody could figure out a way to distract Gray's attention. Prominently placed screens full of data. He would ignore. Data bleamed at him electromagnetically. Razor radio had no effect. And nobody could figure out a way to tunnel the information through a victim's mind as extra memories. It was written off as impossible, closed as a line of investigation. The hard drive Kim finds are right there on the workbench next to the computer. It's a half-rack unit. A cuboidal block of metalwork as big and heavy as a bowling ball. One of the most ineffective conceivable melee weapons. Kim snatches up the 3 longest pieces of Ethernet cable he can and starts plating them into a chain. Then he remembers who he is, and where he is, and what his responsibilities are. He goes up to the computer, to the SCP entry, and adds himself to the victim tally and writes up exactly what he's about to try. Because he might not be the last one, and the world needs to know if this didn't work. Gray comes to the bulkhead to find most of the equipment in the room toppled on the floor, to create a room for the black and silver drive array. That Paul Kim is whirling around his head, on a 2-meter chain made of plated network cable. It makes the low thrumming sound as it whirls. Gray is not intelligent enough to stop moving forwards and catches the array directly in the side of the head. Rack mount post first like a morning star. Gray absorbs a few trillion digits of the impacts, but it isn't enough. There's a green snap of light and the noise like a subway train short-circuiting. And Gray's a pile in the corner. His head caved in and the drive array partially demolished in pieces around him. Kim decides that history can fill in whatever quip it likes best. It's chewing its way up the Antimemetics division hierarchy, Reader tells him in the aftermath. It's only a matter of time until it bit down on somebody dangerous. Congratulations on demonstrating a basic level of competence when it counted. Dozens of others couldn't. Kim still feels rattled, but the shock is dissipating. Faster than he'd expect. Marion Wheeler, it turns out, is the Antimemetics division's chief. She's Kim's new boss. I want to say it was dumb luck, Kim says. I want to say that it is through my phone. It was instinct. It was muscle memory. It was my first day and I got lucky as hell. I want to say those things, but I'm sitting here turning those statements over and over, and none of them would be true, would they? Wheeler waits expectantly and says nothing. You're not my new boss, Kim says. You're just my boss. This isn't my first day at all. I've been working here for, well, it must have been over a decade, right? I think I've been a professional antimemetics researcher since at least the mid-2000s. It's just that the first thing Gray ate was my memories of everything in the past my first day, and then I see very little luck in what happened today, Wheeler says. Instinct and muscle memory are just deep forms of training. Like I said, a basic level of competence. An ability to piece your own life and all of your past knowledge back together faster than nearly anybody else. This is what we try to drill into you. And sometimes, thankfully, it takes. This isn't even the first time we've had this conversation, Kim continues. There have been other incidents with other SCPs with amnestic powers. You've sat there and watched me put myself back together before. And it hasn't gotten old yet. Wheeler admits this with somewhat of a smirk. How long does it take me to recover? A few months, Wheeler says. But if you want the honest truth, people in this division are as competent on day one as they'll ever be. You come into the job firing on all cylinders, or not at all. The rest is just fine-tuning and chemistry. So, what you're saying is you don't really care about my mental state and you just need me back at work now, Kim says. Wither nods. I need an updated SCP entry just to begin with. I need you to nail down the model for Gray's predatory pattern and exactly how you defeated it. I want you to work out what you did with the bodies. Incinerated, disintegrated, or just left them lying around the site rotting perpetually cloaked heaps. And I need countermeasures for when he comes back. It's not dead? Wait. I think I know this one. It's coming back to me. Ideas don't die. Unforgettable. That's what you are. By Quantum. It's finished. Lynn Marnus is more than 90 years old and hasn't stood at his full height in 10. He was a tower of a man in his prime, 2 meters tall and built like a boxer. Nearly nobody he's ever met was able to look him straight in the eye. At least not and tell him no. Illness has gradually eaten away over the years. He feels as if he lives at the bottom of a deep bath, everybody he ever meets looking down at him from a slippery, unscalable walls. None of them ever able to reach down and help him. He's spent his final months crumpled up in bed like a dying spider, changing to a corpse's color ahead of time. It might have been able to be bearable if he hadn't lost his mind. But he remembers what he used to be. A leader. Powerhouse. He used to be able to alter the course of terrible events for the better. To get justice. He used to protect people. You can wake up now. But there's a warm wind through his colorless hair. There's direct sunlight coming down on him now, and the heat's filling him up like a tonic. He's outside. It's been too long since he was last outside. When he opens up his eyes, he sees his lake, the one in the northwest, which he used to have all by himself every summer. He's on a boat. His boat. Lying on a blanket laid on the deck. A few kilometers away behind them is the little lake house, empty. It's perfect. He didn't know he had the strength left to safely leave the hospital, let alone travel this far. But if he put his mind to it, selected the final moment, this might have been it. Do you remember me? Marnus looks, with eyes that are strengthening. The woman speaking is seated on the deck beside him, attentive. She's a large plastic box full of medical supplies open in front of her, and a light suit jacket laid on the deck beside it. And her sleeves are rolled up so she can work. As he watches, she carefully disposes of a needle. A dim memory surfaces and starts taking shape. The woman is twice as old now as when he knew her last, and visibly twice as confident. It would be difficult to forget her. He taught her everything everything he could remember at the time. He remembers her as a field agent. He remembers seeing her through hell, a fistful of times. Marion. The woman softly explains. You've died. You died surrounded by a grieving family. They loved you very much, and they cried over you. The funeral for the fake is in a few days, but unfortunately you won't be able to see yourself. You're dead now, and this is what comes next. Marion Hutchinson. Marnus feels gold spreading through his bones. Miracle juice. It's Wheeler now, but she doesn't correct him. When you retired from the Foundation, we did what we could do with all of us who retired. What is, all of us agreed to do when we sign up. We gave you some medicine, which made you forget. As you stepped out the door for the last time. It's all the work you did for us. Great work, which saved lives, evaporated away. And your cover story sealed over those years became a reality. That's why you spent your whole retirement believing that you were a former section chief at the FBI. It's what you wanted. It's what we wanted. And it's what you agreed to. But you, alone, agreed to something else as well. And you must be starting to remember now what that something else was. I've injected you with a serum that throws the human aging process into the hard reverse. And it affects everything. Organs, tissues, memories. You'll be coming up on it soon, remember? Yes, Marnus croaks, remembering. Dizzy. You signed over your final 12 hours to us. You asked us for a full and happy and well-deserved retirement. But now, for the last day, You work for us again. Because of one particular job. I have it in writing here, you see. Do you recognize his signature? And mine? I witnessed. Yes. Do you remember who you are? Dr. Lynn Patrick Marnus of the Foundation, he says. Antimemetic Division founder. Wither smiles with relief. It's good to see you again. We need some memories from you, she explains. Memories which nobody else in the world has access to, and which are buried so deeply that we can't extract them without killing you. So this afternoon, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to extract those memories, and once we're done, you'll be dead. Marnus has already begun to regress to a time when he himself set this wheel in motion. He remembers very clearly discovering the mystery in his own head. The blank spots which he couldn't explain, and couldn't safely access with any kind of chemical or physical technique. He remembers deferring the mystery until now. What happened in 1976, Wheeler asks. Marnus sits up, his skin becoming clear and his breathing is improving. He feels as if his brain is cleaved in two by a wormhole, such that his eyes are focusing on different time periods. In his right, he sees the lake and the boat he's dying on. And in his left, he sees a colleague of electrifyingly familiar past faces and places. Bart Hughes, with his grin and thick glasses and a baby face, looking at him like some kid dressed up as a Foundation researcher. The original Site-48 crew. Great text, but a hopeless excuse for a softball team. Young Marion, with steel-strong nerves and a mind like a laser. Suits and lab coats and MTF operatives and everywhere paperwork and floods of serial numbers. He starts to speak. 1976 was the year he founded the division. He brainstormed the whole thing in one legendary week, hammering out science and then distilling the first chemical mnestic with the help of a hand-picked trio of assistants. The first antimemetics researchers. No antimemetic SCP had ever been observed up to that point. The entire operation was a shot in the dark, and yet the team immediately struck gold. Passive black holes of information. Active predatory impovores. Unrememberable worms which had covered the human skin like dust mites. Contagious bad news, self-sealing secrets, living murders, Chinatowns. Wheeler wonders if there might have been something more serious awry with Marnus's head. His vision of the events is hopelessly romantic. In Wheeler's experience, nobody looks back on the Foundation fondly. But it was all too fast, Marnus says. Special containment procedures take time to develop. Much more time than I took. The Foundation as a whole acquires about a dozen new SCPs annually. I found that many in 1 year. Essentially single-handedly, and it was too easy. It's as if I already knew it already and was just catching up. And then, one day I realized I couldn't remember my life before Antimemetics. I knew I'd been a Foundation operative for decades prior, and that's where I got the authority to start my own division, but there was nothing else there. It was a wall in my mind of which even Nestics couldn't get me past. I went to the paper archives and looked at my own personal file, and Marnus trails off, not because he's forgotten what to say. Next, it's deliberate. Trailing off is exactly what happened. You woke up with your back at the desk half a working day later, remembering nothing, Wheeler says. You went through the loop a dozen times before somebody realized what was happening and broke you out of it. Wheeler knows all this. The file still exists, and the antimemetic effect still clouds the back half of it. All of this could have been over in a second, if any of that back half could still be read. Marnus goes on. When I assembled the evidence what I found was, well, a hole. Like a jigsaw of only edges and corners. So I did the only thing I could do. I looked at the shape of the hole, and together with Bart Hughes and the others, I formed a theory. This is not the first Antimemetics division. Before 1976, there was another one. I was part of that division. Possibly, I led it. Certainly, I am the only known survivor of it. Something happened to that team. Some antimemetic force chewed up and swallowed out the ideas of every Antimemetics division itself. I was let off, lightly. I lived. The rest of those people? Whoever they are, whoever they were, however many of them there were, are all missing without a trace. Wheeler nods. This much we know already. I was there when you wrote the note, remember? The question is known. The answer that we can't get to go without killing you. It's the answer that we've been waiting all these years to get at. I'm here to ask you, what happened? Wheeler nods. Sorry. Marnus covers his right eye and grimaces. Trying. He fails. It's not there. You won't send me back far enough. There's still more of that in my head. I remember why the question exists, but I don't remember the answer. I need more. Wheeler swabs his arm and gives him another 10 years. Marnus seems like another man once his second X-dose takes effect. Wrinkles are sledding back up into his face, muscle mass is returning to his limbs. But it takes Wheeler a second to realize it's the real reason why. She's just booted them back across the field desk against agent transition. Marnus has regressed a little way past his senior management to the realm where most problems were solved by saying the correct words, and in a time where he survived through physical fitness and situational alertness and hands-on experience. Marnus gets to his feet for the first time in years. He scans his surroundings, examining the placid golden lake and the sky and the boat itself. He doesn't sit down again. He smooths down his hospital gown, wishing he had a sweater, and separately, some fishing gear. He brushes his hand through his new, old hair. His sideburns are back. We weren't Foundation at first, he says. The first Antimemetics division was a U.S. Army project. It ran parallel with Manhattan during World War II. We called ourselves the Unthinkables. Begins as an experiment in advanced propaganda. The objective was to cut through the physical conflict and find a way to rupture the ideological machine, to obliterate the idea of Nazism. After 2 years, enough theory had been developed that the task had been reduced to an engineering problem. Another 2 years, and the engineering problem had been reduced as well, and what we had built was a very special kind of bomb. Unfortunately, we didn't understand what we'd built. Back then, we didn't have amnestics or shielding that could use to protect ourselves, and we didn't understand how far ahead you need to think when you're working with this kind of technology. We got looped. It was textbook. We built the unthinkable and test detonated it, and it worked perfectly. The bomb destroyed itself and erased its own successful detonation, and flattened all the knowledge which had gone together to build it. We'd forgotten together that we had built the bomb at all. Started over. To our credit, we realized pretty quickly what had must have happened. There was a 4-year gap in our progress now, and there was no other way to explain it. But by the time we put the pieces together, the second time, the war was almost over, and Nazis had been defeated by conventional means. The Japanese had been broken by the first atomic bombings, so we completed the second antimemetic bomb after that, and sat on it. Marion Wheeler stood silent for a moment. The U.S. Army, she says doubtfully, was secretly developing antimemetic weaponry as early as the 1940s. We were sure, Marnus says, with more than a confident hint of pride. Of course, there was no one in the world who could back this up. That's right, Marnus says, flashing a smile he hadn't flashed in decades. You only have my word for it. Cute, huh? Still, this is why you resurrected me, isn't it? For the sake of one more good war story. God, I've missed this shop talk. I resurrected you because I want a very specific question answered, Wheeler said. Although I can see that in a way you've already answered it. The bomb was the means, wasn't it? The old Antimemetics division. The Unthinkables. Bombed themselves somehow. That's right, Marnus says. From context, Wheeler goes on, I assume that they knew what they were doing at that time. I assume it was not an accident. It was not, Marnus says. The displaced half of Marnus's brain is anchored in the 70s now. So is the true history of the new origin Unthinkables is an open book to him, and he reads. After the war, the second bomb collected dust for years, and we began sketching improv designs for a third bomb. But all that time oversight was starting to flicker out. We'd completed our research and production objectives and were given no further objectives. Funding became shaky and we couldn't figure out why. It wasn't extremely clear that the project overseers knew what we were doing, or even that they remembered we existed. It was a side effect from our research. Of course, one had no way of managing at the time. In 1951, a cult movement began in Ojai, California. It was wrong. Everything about it was just wrong. In a matter of days, it was a national phenomenon and still growing. It was all over the news. To spread that far in months would have been credible. But it was simply impossible. But in days, it was simply impossible. We, in the team, could see that it was the philosophy behind the cult that was unnaturally contagious. It was the opposite of unthinkable, was unforgettable. And this time, we knew what our bomb was designed for. We prompted the overseers for direction, but there were no orders. At the time that the outbreak began, we were a U.S. Army laboratory through and through. 8 days into the crisis, the Foundation acquired us. All the classified research, all the material resources, and all the compliance top staff, including me. Anybody who couldn't comply was mind-wiped and sent back to the Army. 20 hours after the acquisition, we deployed the second bomb and the cult was gone. Nobody remembered it. Nobody remembered being part of it. 0 loss of life, a completely clean detonation. After is when everything really kicked off. Once we started working for the Foundation, the pace of research ramped up. Every new technological advancement uncovered new hidden SCPs. I passed the Foundation field exams and went on to catching ghosts. My life turned into the Twilight Zone. Marnus blinks hard. He covers one of his eyes and then the other. I remember all these different people now, he says. It feels like my memory's in stereo. Almost every antimemetic SCP we've caught before the wipe was in 76. We caught again as soon after the wipe. It means I remember 2 acquisition logs for each one. I remember 2 antimemetic teams, and I don't remember who belongs on which side of the wall. Do you remember Goldie Yarrow, the neurologist? Studied the mechanism of anomalously accelerated memory loss? Wrote a library on the subject? Wheeler doesn't. Mr. Ojobiru? Julie Still? Oh, this is important. Are you at the right place in your own timeline to remember what happened yet? Marnus focuses and discovers that he is. Something changes in his eyes as he stops reminiscing. He speaks more slowly now, his voice dropping to a whisper. There's an SCP to which your division has never seen. The SCP which my division couldn't contain. The escapee. This is what you wanted, isn't it, Marin? Yes, she says. This is the data I'm killing you for. She leaves a gap where, if she felt there was anything to apologize for, she would apologize. Marnus locks eyes with her. It was eating my division alive. It came at us so hard and so fast that the only way we could stop it was to self-destruct. But we had no sight nuke. And in retrospect, it was obvious to me now that this was because the SCP had consumed our sight nuke first of all. You know it exists, it knows you exist. The more you know about it, the more it knows about you. If you can see it, it can see you. And you can see it. You've been looking right at it all afternoon. Wheeler is suddenly acutely aware of her surroundings. There are only 2 of them on the boat. The boat is anchored more than a kilometer from any of the lake shores. She hasn't brought any backup with her. There's a radioactive prickling in her brain. She doesn't. Red flag. Why didn't I bring any backup with me? Doesn't make sense. There should be a team at the lake house. There should be MPF operative and a medic here at the boat with me. And a second boat at a minimum. Am I all alone in here? Why did I do that? She pulls her gun, but doesn't aim it at Marnus yet. Where is it? Is it in you? Marnus's voice is becoming urgent. He covers both of his eyes again. Destroying all knowledge was the only way to destroy it, and restoring my memories was the foolproof way to bring it back. It's in his eyes, most likely his left eye. Wheeler backs up to the other side of the boat, draws a bead on the center of Marnus's head, and says, "El, you still in there?" There's a way to fix this, Marnus says, dropping to his knees. He keeps his eyes screwed up and gropes his way forward blindly on his hands and knees. El, you need to tell me what this thing is. That is the opposite of what we need to do, Marna says. You need to set another bomb off. We don't have that bomb. We lost the technology, Wheeler begins. You've always had it. There's an engineering lab in Site 41. You know it. An underground complex the size of a football field in pristine condition, totally disused. Why? Think about it. That's where your bomb's installed. That just sets us back to square one. If I set up the bomb, Wheeler says, knowing full well that she is thousands of kilometers from it and can't reach it in time anyway. How do we contain this thing? We won't, Marnus has shouted. We can't. Ever. Don't you get it? The whole division is looped. We start the division, we run headlong into this thing, and it either eats us or we wipe ourselves out in self-preservation. The idea anti-memes is as old as forgetfulness itself. Humans have been looping through this problem over and over again since long before the 40s. Maybe for centuries. He's blindly probing his finger into the medical box. It's too late. As Wither watches, a waving black pediplat, coated in dark hairs, forces its way through Marnus's left eye. Marnus screams, still on his knees. He grasps the pediplat with both hands and tries to break it. But it's solid, as if bones are inside it. What is it? Wheeler shouts at him. That can't be the whole story. Where's it from? What does it want? Can it reason? Can it speak? Help! A second spider leg, significantly longer and spindlier, slides out through Marnus's trachea, ruining his throat and voice box and producing a gout of blood. He gurgles. A third leg shoots from his abdomen, like a spear. Wheeler shoots Marnus in the head. Marnus falls forward, limp, and then rises back up, lifted by the 3 spider appendages as if a puppet were being controlled by something gigantic and invisible. His arms raise, as if suspended by wires. Wheeler squints. She fires 4 more shots over Marnus's head, at the likely body mass of the invisible puppeteer, and fires the rest of the clip almost directly into the sky. The whole boat vibrates, along with the surface of the lake, as if responding to infrasound or a localized earthquake. Then the whole boat shudders violently and starts to lift up out of the water, raised by more unseen appendages. Wheeler holsters her gun and goes for the medical box herself, pulling it away from Marnus's floating feet. There's a compartment with Class B amnestic, fast-acting stuff, in serum form. She does a hurried burst of mental arithmetic, measures out the correct dosage in a syringe, and, hands shaking, plunges it into a wrist vein. The boat is still rising. Whatever the monster is, it's colossally tall. Maybe it flies. She is, of course, already dosed up to the eyeballs with mestic drugs. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to perceive any of this. Foundation medical literature warns the strongest possible terms against putting both kinds of drug into use in the same brain. Best case scenario, this ends with her in the hospital. They're 30 meters up into the air now, 10 stories. There's a stabbing pain developing in her left eye. She kicks her shoes off and throws the gun away. She goes to the edge and contemplates the drop for a disbelieving second. She jumps. It takes 2 heart-stopping seconds of free fall for her to hit the water. She's chilled. The chilled hammer blow of the impact is enough to blank her mind out. By the time she surfaces, she doesn't remember where she fell from or why. And likely, the skyscraper-sized being which claimed Marnus and the boat has forgotten about her. What the hell, she gasps? What the hell? What the hell? Where the hell? There's nothing above her. No explanation. Only the symptoms of a drug cocktail gave her any indication of what just happened. Sensation like hundreds of tiny lumps of solder in her brain. And pain and exhaustion spreading into all of her tendons. She just wants to die. Swim, says a part of her. Get to shore first, then you can die. The extraction team finds her around dusk, unconscious on the lake shore. They stabilize her in the helicopter and take her to Site 41 for examination. Diver system flushed. She spends a solid 8 days at home, detoxifying, no amnestics, no exposure to dangerous memory-corrupting SCPs, no work visitors, no work. The doctor also tells her pointlessly. This isn't anywhere near her first missing event in Wheeler's life. Nor is she the first person of the amnestic staff to have such an experience. But the sensation is no less disturbing for its familiarity. As per procedure, she writes a short report summarizing everything she can remember. The gap in her memory is about 13 hours. She then adds to her report to the extensive complex map of missing time, which the whole division maintains collectively. It is a map of holes. A map that is becoming large enough for very faint patterns are gradually forming. The outline of an enemy is becoming visible, or perhaps a group of enemies. When she quizzes the extraction team later, none of them remember who activated the emergency beacon, which summoned them. In fact, the beacon itself cut out long before they landed at the lake. Wheeler compares the current size of her division with her best estimate of what it should be. Maybe she needs a few more key people here and there, so assuming the division were fully staffed before the event, maybe those empty roles are people who died this time around. Maybe some of them activated the beacon. A commendable act. As someone who now only knows to exist, who is only known to exist because of that single act. Weeks later, that Wheeler discovers the largest hole in her memory. Who founded the division? When? Case Colorless Green, written by Quantum. Item SCP-3125. Object Class Keter. 3125 is kept inside the Cognitohazard Containment Unit 3125 on the first floor of Site 41. This containment unit is 10 meters by 15 meters by 3 meters. A cuboidal room clad in layers of lead, soundproofing, and telepathic shielding. Access is through an airlock system at one end of the containment unit. This airlock is programmed to allow only one person to enter the containment unit at a time, and to remain locked until this person exits before allowing any other person to enter. Under no circumstances may any coherent information be allowed to leave the containment unit. This includes written and electronic notes, photographs, audio and video recordings, sound, electromagnetic and particle-based signals, and psi emanations. During the exit cycle, a purge system rigged to the airlock flushes the occupant's memory by flooding the airlock with amnestic gas for 3 minutes. A senior Amnestics Division staff member must visit SCP-3125 every 6 weeks for 42 days. End of file. You're kidding me. That's the whole entry? That's the whole entry, Wheeler says. This isn't even the 5th strangest thing Paul Kim has seen in the database, but still, no description, no acquisition report, no test log, no addenda, no clue who built the unit, or when, or how many times it's been visited, or who carries out the previous visits, or when they took it with them, or how long they were in there? Well, obviously, Bart Hughes built the unit, Wheeler says. This cannot be denied. The man's signature style of containment architecture is recognizable a mile out. Sleek, white, plainly impregnable without an aid of an extremely heavy tool. Which makes it at least 7 years old. That's 60 visits or more. I guess there are good reasons for the rest of the omniscience. Anyway, the timer watchdog says it's time again. I don't like the idea of routinely exposing yourself to a cognitohazard so dangerous we can't ever write the reason that we can't ever write the reason why we can't write it down, Kim says. Especially because it's impossible for us to recover any usable information this way. You're gonna go in, be incommunicatable for 2 hours and come out a smiling amnestic. What do we gain for that? It's just a breach risk. Wheeler hears every word of this and elects to ignore it all. There's a vague shape of familiarity around the entry as written. There are a few word choices which reassure her in an intangible way that it was written by somebody who knew what they were doing. Possibly her. Kim's still talking. You should just scrub the last line from the data entry. There can't be anything good in that room. Wheeler puts her keycard in the slot. The airlock rewards her with the green LEDs and begins to cycle open. It's built as a slender vertical cylinder with a single opening. The entire thing rotates on its axis. Inside, there's barely room for a single person to stand without their shoulders touching the walls. What are you taking? Kim asks. Wheeler ducks in, turns to face him and shrugs. Stick of gum. I can get you field gear, Kim says, as the airlock begins to rotate again, emitting a low, quiet thrum solely as an audible warning that there is a machinery in motion. We'll read inventory. Give me 15 minutes and I'll turn you into a one-woman warp. If Wheeler says anything in response to this, it's cut off by the soundproofing as the airlock rotates. Kim is left alone in the antechamber. He stares at the outer door with a worried moment. He presses his ear to the door for a while, but hears nothing. Not even a faint tremble of the airlock mechanism. Inside, it's pitch dark for a few seconds. Then, some unseen detector detects Wheeler's presence and brings up the fluorescents up. Half of them, anyways. The others remain inert or flicker aggressively. The room's interior walls are made from milky white glass, bulletproof, knowing hues, and plastered with paperwork, taped and blue-tacked up in various coherent messes. There is no paperwork. Where there is no paperwork, people have drawn directly on the walls or in marker pen. There's a conference table, long and elliptical, covered with more paperwork and tangible and a tangible laptop computers and a serpentine power supply cables. Power has returned to the machines, which they are slowly booting. A data projector warms up and shines a map of the world on the far wall, almost lining up with a network of scribbled annotations of the same wall. Post notes of all colors litter the carpet like autumn leaves. Other than that, the room is empty. Skimming the paperwork, Wheeler discovers that nearly all of it is handwritten, and most of it charts the progress of conversations. Most of the entries are dated and signed, and most of the dates are weeks apart. Conversations are panicked and fearful back and forth about dozens of SCPs. Some of them antimemetic in nature, but none of them obviously related to one another. Some of the notes mention SCP-3125. The only name Wheeler recognizes is her own, which appears in 10 or 20 of the notes. The notes seem authentic and the handwriting is hers, but the notes also seem desperate and uncertain in tone as everybody else's. This unnerves her. There are diagrams on the wall too, which are too complex to decode at a glance, but complex enough to make her eyes hurt to look at them. She is lost for a logical entry point to the data. Wheeler curses all of her predecessors. Asynchronous research, whereby the research topics is forgotten entirely between iterations and rediscovered over and over, is a perfectly standard practice in the antimemetic division, and her people ought to be better trained at this. There should be an obvious single document to read first, which makes sense of the rest primer. Marion, it's me. Wheeler recognizes the voice as her own. She moves around the table until she finds the laptop making the noise. There's a video playing, apparently recorded on the laptop's own camera in the room. Marion Wheeler, in the video, is seated, and looks unfamiliar in a way which takes the one watching a moment to put her finger on. Not exhausted, not sick, not physically beaten or injured, she's herself in a way she's seen herself that way before, in the mirror. This woman's willpower is gone. She's beaten. You've guessed it already. SCP-3125 is not in this room, she says. In fact, this is the only room in the world where SCP-3125 is not present. It's called inverted containment. SCP-3125 pervades all of reality except for her volumes, which have been specifically shielded from its influence. This is it. This is our only safe harbor. This room represents the length and the breadth of this war. Every competent antimemetics research project finds SCP-3125's fingerprints sooner or later. It's manifest all over the world, in thousands of different forms. Most of them aren't even anomalous. Some of them we've just cataloged separately in the main database. A very small number of them are even in containment. Impossibly virtual cults, broken arithmetic, invisible spiders as tall as skyscrapers, people born with extra organs nobody can see. That's the raw data. Those manifestations are troublesome enough to deal with in their own right. Wheeler, in the video, spins around, picks up a bright green felt-tip pen and a blank piece of paper. She begins drawing a shape which isn't visible from the camera's perspective, while still talking. But, once you get a little further down the road, you start to see the pattern emerging in the data. You need to have training in memetic science. But once you have that training, and you have the data in front of you, it only takes a little extra effort to arrange those data points into a conceptual space and draw the contour through them. Those data points are SCP-3125's hull. Those manifestations are the shadows that cast on our reality. You link 4 or 5 different SCPs together into a single shape, and you see it. And it sees you. She's still drawing. It's detailed, she doesn't look up, and the tone of her voice is distant. Almost as if she's narrating the tail end of a frightening children's story. When that happens, when you make eye contact, it kills you. It kills you, and it kills anybody who thinks like you. Physical distance doesn't matter. It's about mental proximity. Anybody with the same ideas, anybody in the same headspace, kills your collaborators, your whole research team, it kills your parents, your children. You become absent humans. Human-shaped shells surrounding holes in reality. And when it's done, your project is a hole in the ground. And nobody knows what SCP-3125 is anymore. It's a black hole in antimemetic science, consuming unweary researchers, yielding no information, only detectable through indirect observation. A true description of what SCP-3125 is, or even an allusion to what it is, constitutes a containment breach and a lethal indirect cognito hazard. You see, the defense mechanism. This information swallowing behavior is just the outer layer, the poison coating. It protects the entity from discovery while it infests our reality. And as years pass and manifestations will continue, growing denser and knitting together, until the whole world is drowning in them, and everybody will be screaming, why did nobody realize what was happening? And nobody will answer because everybody who realized was killed by this system. Do you see, Marion? Do you see it now? Wheeler is at the core of the foundation in antimemetic science. She has had all the raw data readily accessible. There is an extensive written calculation to the walls, but she doesn't need to read them. She can do them in her head. And all it took was the slightest push, the slightest suggestion. She's staring through the laptop screen. Eyes widened into focused. She understands how it links together. She sees SCP-3125. She is dwarfed by it. Encountered terrible, powerful ideas before, at every level of memecity, and subdued them or even recruited them. But what she's picturing now is on an order of magnitude from what she knew would be possible. Now she knows it's there, and she can feel it like cosmic radiation boring holes in the world with thousands of manifestations, and freely laying waste to anybody who recognizes the larger pattern. It's not of reality, not of humanity. It is from higher, a worse place, and it's descending. The other Wheeler presents the finished diagram. She's drawn a mutated, fractally complex, grasping hand with a 5-fold symmetry. It has no wrist or arm, just 5 long human fingers pointing in 5 directions. At its core, there's a pentagonal opening which could be a mouth. But the diagram was already there. It's plastered across the wall in the background of the video, plain as day. A meticulous collage in green. Easily 2 meters in diameter and showing the same meme complex to the 100 times level of detail. There are smaller diagrams of different elevations arrayed around it, like spores, arms spread wide around the seated Wheeler, who sits directly in front of the mouth, with her back to it. Wheeler watching does not realize this, and does not turn around. How do you fight an enemy without ever discovering it exists? Wheeler in the video asks. How do you win without ever realizing you're at war? What do we do? 7 years ago, there were more than 400 antimemetic research groups worldwide. Government agencies, military branches, private corporations, university projects. Many of them were GOIs or subdivisions of GOIs. We were allied with most of them, and we were at the spearhead of an antimemetic coalition, which spanned the whole globe and thousands upon thousands of people. Now, none of those groups exist. The last one ceased to exist sometime in the last 72 hours. 3 years ago. Foundation Antimemetics was an organization of more than 4,000 people. Now, it's 90. There is no war. We've lost the war. It's over. This is a mopping up operation. The only reason we still exist at all is because we have better amnestic biochemistry than anybody else in the world. Because that is all you can do once you see SCP-1325. Run away and try to forget what you saw. Seek oblivion in chemicals or alcohol or head trauma, and even that can't work every time. It's circling in. We meet it over and over and over again, and we don't realize it. There's no way to stop ourselves from rediscovering it. We're too damn smart. She points at something on the wall, out of view on the laptop's camera. Wither, watching turns, looks up. It's in the upper corner of the room. It is a constellation of dizzyingly complicated schematics. Bart Hughes' initials are on every page. It is a machine we could build. All it would take is 8 years. A lab as big as West Virginia and all the money in the world. Nothing the O5 Council would blink at if we went to them. But how do we build that machine without any of us realizing what it's for? It'd be like building and launching Apollo 11 without a single engineer deducing that the moon exists. Logistics would be insane, but secrecy would be well past impossible. Somebody would start asking questions, and then it would be over. So what do we do? Find another way, Wheeler says to the unhearing recording. Fatalistic tone of voice makes her angry. The hell is wrong with you? I could tell everybody to walk away. I could send a little message to myself saying, there's danger down this road. You should disband the Antimemetics division and pursue other projects. But I'd be suspicious. I'd start asking questions and then it would be over. Wheeler is now crouched in front of the video, trying to understand what she's watching. What's wrong, Marion? Are you okay? I could kill myself in here, the recording says, but my team would find SCP-3125 without me, and then they'd have to fight it without me. It's gonna happen soon. Whatever happens, it's in the next 2 months at most. This year, it'll be all over. I might die in here anyways. I'm on so many amnestic drugs that my endocrine system is shutting down. Taking amnestics at the same time is the chemical equivalent of trepanation. I don't remember the last time I slept without having a nightmare about Adam, and I'm starting to forget whether SCP-4987 is a real thing or just a number I gave to fix my life. Not like this, Wheeler whispers. You're stronger than this. What happened to you? Who's Adam? I don't know how we survived this. I don't know how we win. We're the last ones in this world. After this, there's nobody left. Wheeler shakes her head, not believing it. So I'm done. I'm going to walk out this door and forget who I am, and then I'm going to be you, Marion. And you troll have to find a way out of it. And you'll have to find a way out to figure a way out of this, because I can't. She gets up and moves off screen. She can be heard breathing deeply. Her speech is starting to distort. God, my eyes hurt. I think I'm starting to inside. There's the sound of a door opening, and the piercing pulse of a sound and light which terminates the recording. Wheeler stares at the dark screen for a long minute. She's never seen herself so weak, and it damages her ego a great deal to see that it's possible. She feels disconnected from what she saw, and like it happened in an alternate universe. She feels revulsed and appalled by that version of her. More so to know that version still is inside her somewhere. Doesn't make sense. I'm looking at all the facts. What made her give up? What did she know that I don't? Who was Adam? The answer to this question is so obvious and sickening that she instinctively distrusts it. She circles around to the answer, probing it and trying to find reasons to reject it, but it's inexplicable. Adam was someone she knew when the video was recorded, now completely removed from her memory. Adam was someone she thought whose safety paralyzed her with fear. Adam was someone, the thought of whose safety paralyzed her with fear. Someone in the same headspace. Someone she couldn't bear to lose. And then she lost. But what if... How'd the room get built in the first place? Anybody's guess. Wheelers imagine Hughes building it as a proof of concept, followed by a cascading series of Lucky's chances, which led to it becoming a war room. Someone discovered 1325 at random. While sealed in this room, they wrote notes to themselves which marked a skeletal external SCP database entry which contained... And the containment procedures, most of the paperwork and computer hardware was left behind by later visitors. Could have happened. But what if there's another room? Unbidden. A cute factoid comes right back to her then. Site 41 is almost completely vacant. In particular, 200 meters below Site 41, there's an empty heavy engineering lab. An underground complex the size of a hockey stadium. Self-contained, in pristine condition, totally disused. Sealed up. The original purpose forgotten. Nobody has entered it in a living memory. But who knows how many decades back a dead generation of antimemeticists. What if that's where we built our weapon? Do I really believe I'm that smart? That my team had that much foresight? That we got that lucky? She turns to look at the airlock, running the numbers in her head. Antimemetics division staff, other than me, 38. 42 days until the next iteration. That's past the end of the year. It'll be too late. If I leave this room now, I will never be back. The plan I have now is the best plan there's ever going to be. We are the last ones in the world. After us, there is nobody. Kim is so deeply buried in work at his terminal, and the airlock is so quiet that he almost doesn't notice when it starts to cycle again. "We need to check you for notes," it begins, and then he begins to see that Marion Wheeler is curled up in the bottom of a narrow cylinder, panting as though she had just finished a marathon run. Kim holds a hand out, but she shakes her head, listening to Say lying down, knees bent up into her chest, sucking down lungfuls of air. "What happened in there?" Kim asks. "Just need to breathe. Be okay in a second. I think I blacked out for a moment. I might have just inhaled some. I think I'm okay. I remember the plan." Kim looks confused and worried for a second. Then they replace him. "You shouldn't be able to remember anything. What did you do?" "It hit my head," Wheeler says, then goes back to concentrating on breathing properly. She suddenly becomes acutely aware that Kim has her effectively cornered. Disliking this configuration for reasons she is only gradually putting back together, she levers herself up one shoulder and tries to stand. Kim puts a hand on her shoulder and pushes her back down. "You look terrible," he says. "There's something on your neck." "Do you see that?" He points to her throat, taps the spot. "What?" "On your neck." "I have no. You've been infected by whatever was in there. We've got to act quickly." He reaches for a key ring and unthreads the Swiss Army knife and unfolds a short, gleaming blade. He does this in such a methodical, ordinary way that Wheeler almost forgets to react when he leans down towards her to cut her throat. Almost, she grips his wrist. They're locked for the moment. A tableau. She looks into Kim's eye, but it isn't his eye anymore. She squints, wondering if she's made eye contact with anything but a hole in space. She already feels the force bearing down on her own skull, trying to drill into it, but she knows its shape, and she knows she can hold out. Maybe for a few minutes. She's hoped and prayed that Kim would not succumb so quickly. And in a crazed little way, she thought that there would at least be a sign. A theoretical doubling over as his mind was wrenched out of its socket. Kim's wrist palm spasms as he tries to lunge with a knife. Wheeler parries as the tip glances off the airlock interior with a screech. They scuffle for an awkward second, and then she boots Kim in the stomach with both feet, sending him sprawling into the antechamber. She launches out of the airlock, dives over him, and sprints away from the containment unit. She feels SCP-3125 following her as she runs, like a spotlight. She hears it crash in another part of the site, as the first piece of the ceiling caves in. Your Last First Day by Quantum. Marion Wheeler is curled into the corner of Site 41's main freight elevator, descending, clutching a shiny red ray gun almost as long as she is tall. The gun has a two-tined prong instead of a barrel and is stock in a weirdly asymmetrical mass of pipework, more like a Swiss watch or not a small intestinal tract than a weapon. The gun is SCP-7381, and it comes from a long-dead planet, not too distant when all is said and done. Not too distant a planet when all is said and done, which conventional astronomy has yet to observe. A tornado of violence and destruction is tearing through Site 41 and through the minds of everybody working at Site 41. Ceilings are being brought down. The site's pharmacy is a sucking hole at the side of the building. The armory is buried, and that's why she had to go through Area 9 and is now toting an anomalous weaponry instead. The Antimemetics division operatives meets in the corridors are all broken. Some of them curl up raving while their minds evaporate and they die one memory at a time. Some infected with a collection of ideas which compel them to shout guttural phrases in strange languages and probe and to procure blades, never guns, and work on those demented victims, each other, and themselves. Wheeler doesn't recognize any of the people. Their faces are all wrong, torn up with hatred and misery and vindictive glee. She's been avoiding fighting, but she's had to kill one man in self-defense. Fired at his heart, SCP-7381 simply erased a half-meter wide cylinder of matter, removing his upper torso and lower jaw. He fell to the ground in 4 pieces. SCP-7381's beam is invisible, silent, recoilless. It's like using a child's toy gun. Wheeler is petrified, but more than that, angry. "This is too much," she says, out loud, willing her heart rate back under control. "I can't deal with this. I shouldn't have to deal with this. It's my first fucking day." But how much sense does that make? Wheeler studies her own reflection in the dark glass of the elevator control panel, and she tours the interior of her own skull, examining her thought processes. There are hints there, which would be difficult to articulate to somebody who didn't know her as well as she knows herself. She isn't thinking like a newbie. She's instinctively breaking the problem apart the way an experienced Foundation operative should have. Hell, a newbie wouldn't even know how to carry out a detailed psychological self-examination of this kind. A newbie wouldn't even think of it. A newbie would just suffocate. The first thing it did when it saw me, she said, explains to her reflection, was eat something I knew about my division and everything else I knew about it. If I had a plan, it ate that plan. But I'm still me. So I can come up with a plan again? It's already right in front of me. I just need to see it. If I were me, what would my plan have been? She scratches absently at her left wrist. Taking some hardcore monastic drugs would have been a smart first step, I guess, she mutters, reinforcing my mind so I can't erase the rest. Damn. The nearest source of monastic medicine was the site pharmacy, but it's already been destroyed. And in any case, the elevator's headed down, away from it. No, stop. The pharmacy's been destroyed. How did I know that? Well, it's because she was there. She remembers finding the pharmacist crushed to death beneath a fallen medical cabinet, her skull an unrecognizable splatter of scarlet. She remembers the floor being torn away beneath her feet and only barely making out of that portion of the building alive. She remembers a modular package of colored safety orange, an enormous black Z on it. Her heart rate nearly stops at this. God, what did I do? She remembers a dozen of warning signs covering the package. She remembers the 3-factor authorization procedure she had to follow to get the sealed container to where it was stored. She remembers the centimeter-thick book of medical advisory information, which she discarded, and rolling up her left sleeve back, she finds a fresh needle mark with a speck of blood, and remembers administering an injection. Was this my plan? This is what it takes to fight SCP-3125? I've killed myself! Class Z monastics are the last word in biochemical memory fortification. Class Z monastics permanently destroyed the subject's ability to forget. The result is a perfect eidetic memory, and a perfect immunity to arbitrarily strong amnestic interference. The dose is taking effect now, and Wheeler didn't read the book because she already knew every word of it. She knows everything that's about to happen to her. She already can feel her mind hardening like steel and developing the symptoms of extreme sensory overload. She can see everything. There are buttons on the elevator control panel, the lowest of which, the 13th floor below ground level, she's somehow already pushed. The walls of the elevator are covered with graffiti scrawled by the desperate and dying, the people whose conceptual presence was eradicated from reality years earlier by Alistair Gray, an antimemetic kill agent, reducing them to the level of ghosts. In the corner of the freight elevator, there was even a half-corpse, unidentifiable, so many layers removed from reality that not even flies can smell it. Its cells winking out of existence asymptotically over the course of the years. There's a fistful of tiny white worms exploring the floor of the elevator car, near where she's been sitting. Revolted, Wheeler shuffles back from them, shaking one or two of them out of her hair. The worms are amongst the most widespread and successful antimemetically closed organisms in the world, and they are everywhere, in every biome, in every room. She can hear a long, alarming drone noise, continual roaring which has the texture of an ambient noise, and it's continually getting louder. It's been there her entire life, and she only now has she begun to hear it. It's too much data, too much town, too much light. Having her eyes open like this is jamming them full of needles. She clamps her hands down over her ears and screws her eyes up. Even like this, she feels the vibration of the elevator's slow descent and the heat of the failed air conditioning and the movement of her clothes on her skin. Meanwhile, her vision's flooding instead with what could be hallucinations. The human sensorium routinely generates huge amounts of data, to which the human brain is adapted to discard almost all of the data nearly immediately. Altering the brain's behavior to retain that data is extremely dangerous, even for short spans of time. Wheeler takes one hand away from her ear just long enough to punch the metal wall of the elevator car, bloodying 2 knuckles. The pain gives her a focal point, a memory which screams a little louder than the rest. She finds the plan, she just doesn't remember it. She bootstraps it from first principles. In a handful of minutes, she's done like she's done 100 times before. I know how to beat you, she says. No. Sorry. No, SCP-3125 says to her. You don't. The elevator stops at the 13th floor below ground level and its doors open. They wait, open for a long time. Further up the elevator shaft, there's a distant rumbles of more parts of Site-41 being reduced to crumbs. Still crouched in the corner, Wheeler mutters, SCP-3125 doesn't have a voice. Of course I do, it replies. SCP-3125 is a 5-dimensional anomalous metastaticized mass of bad memes and anti-memes and everything between seeping through our physical reality. It isn't coherent, and it isn't intelligent. It can't communicate. This is an auditory hallucination. SCP-3125 scoffs. You know what I hate most about you, Marion? You're constantly, eternally wrong. And yet you are still alive. All those lost battles, every year of lost war. And yet you always cobble together enough dumb luck to walk away unscathed. The eternal sole survivor. You don't deserve that kind of luck. Nobody does. While it's talking, Wheeler leans hard on the ray gun to get to her feet. She lodges one shoulder against the wall of the elevator car. With her eyes still closed, she braces herself and opens her eyes. The corridor ahead is empty. There's an airlock at the far end, one that is large enough to drive a truck through. Built from ultra-toughened white metal alloy in Bart Hughes' established style, there's a panel on the inside beside the airlock. She closes her eyes again and hobbles forward, using the ray gun as a crutch, stretching one hand out ahead of her as guidance. Someone has to be the last, she says, gritting her teeth. Someone has to be the best. Your team is dead. Their minds pulled out like eyeballs. They're hollow people, with holes in space where their brains were. The war is over! Finally, it's just you, Marion. A division of one. Dying from monastic overdose 200 meters underground. Cared for by no one. Known to exist by no one. Up against an immortal, unkillable idea. Wheeler reaches the airlock and fumbles blindly with the panel until she finds the slot for her keyguard. For a few seconds, it seems as if nothing is happening. Then a yellow light flashes, and the enormous mechanical interlocks unlatch, and the door cycles open, with all the fuss of a flower's petals unfurling. Noise. Hughes always held a symptom of imperfect engineering. Hughes always held. It's a symptom of imperfect engineering. Behind her, she hears the freight elevator close up and return to the ground level. She knows that somebody hasn't summoned it. She knows someone has summoned it, intending to pursue her. Ideas can be killed, she says, stepping into the airlock. How? With better ideas. As the airlock cycle closes, so does the hermetic seal. SCP-3125 is shut out. If something can cross over from its conceptual space into reality taking physical form, then something can cross in the opposite direction. It must be possible to take a physical entity, mechanically extract the idea which it embodies, amplify the idea, and broadcast it up into conceptual space. A bigger idea. A better idea. One designed specifically to fight SCP-3125. An ideal, a movement, a hero. The machine Wheeler needs to build is the size of an Olympic stadium, and she doesn't have the fraction of a heavy memetic engineering experience to do it, let alone the material resources or the time. But she knows someone taught her. She doesn't remember who. That's an Antimemetics division operative as a good on their first day as they've always... that an Antimemetic division operative is as good on their first day as they are to ever likely be. And the same is true as the division as a whole. She tells herself, we won this door the day it began. When we encountered SCP-3125 for the first time, we built this bunker. Bart Hughes faked his death and sequestered himself here so he could work uninterrupted. While the rest of the division held on for as long as humanly possible, buying time for this moment. I know this is what I did, because it's what I would have done. I'm the final component. He's waiting for me. The space beyond the airlock is gigantic, structured and lit like an aircraft hangar, filled with hot, stale, dry air. The Wheeler, still mostly blind, stumbles forward across an expanse of no more than a hectare of flat, dusty epoxy flooring. Hughes! She shouts into the void. It's time! Nothing comes back but an echo. She glances up for a second. The space is empty. The castle-sized memetic amplification broadcasting unit, which Bart Hughes was meant to be building, is absolutely absent. Hughes himself was absent. Maybe the entire machine was anti-memetically cloaked, she wonders momentarily. Would be a smart way to conceal the operation even from the rest of the Foundation. But her brain is curdling in the strongest monastic drug ever manufactured. There's genuinely nothing here. Almost nothing. At the center of the space, there's a small outpost. A group of trestle tables with tools and toolboxes scattered about the place. Parked behind it is an unmarked military truck with flat tires. On the back of the truck is a squat, squarish machine the size of a shipping container, with unshielded wiring and exposed pipework, and a long cable leading to a heavy-duty control panel on the floor. To the untrained eye, it is not all clear what this machine is designed to do. It's the antimemetic equivalent of a hydrogen bomb, the division's answer to a Site nuclear warhead. Activated, it would contaminate Site-41 and everything and everyone on it with antimemetic radiation. There would be no Site-41, and there would be no division afterwards. Nothing any of the escaping infectious staff did could have had any effect on the real world. It's the wrong machine. It can't destroy or contain SCP-3125 or even injure it. All it can do is sterilize today's outbreak. The other symptoms will persist. 50 or 10 or 5 years from now, or maybe 1 year from, or maybe tomorrow, SCP-3125 would return, bringing its MK class end to the world scenario. Human civilization will be entirely eradicated as an abstract concept, and be replaced by something unimaginably worse. There would be no one to fight it. We leans on the ray gun for a long moment, the pressure of information in her mind continuously increasing, and reaches a point where she can't take it anymore and she begins to break. The Class Z has been in their system for long enough now that she knows for a fact she has irreversible brain damage. There is no antidote. She'll be lucid for another hour, then spending the remaining 2 or 3 hours of her life vegetative. That's right, she thinks. It's almost a relief. This is good. This is right. Survived for too long. Forgot what universe this was. For a while there, I thought, maybe. This was this universe where we win sometimes. The agony in her head was like an ice axe now. She drops the ray gun with a clatter, sinks to her knees, lies down and waits for either death or a better idea. A being superficially resembling Paul Kim arrives at the outer airlock door. He examines the airlock uncomprehendibly for a few seconds, and then finds the keycard slot. It hunts methodically through Kim's pockets, then remembers the keycard around his neck. The airlock cycles once more, and not Kim goes through. Behind it, the freight elevator is returning to ground level for a third time, to fetch the rest. In the next room, the being which is not Paul Kim finds the wheeler, unconscious, the ray gun dropped beside her. There's a military truck, which it disregards. Not Kim lets its keycard fall from its fingers and scoops up the ray gun. For a moment, it contemplates the unconscious wheeler, and examines the gun itself, remembering how it works. It turns to face the airlock and fires, punching fat cylindrical holes in the white material of the inner door until it's gone. Then the outer door too, breaching the hermetic seal. A faint smile returns to Not Kim's face as SCP-3125 and its familiar, comforting signal floods into the bunker. A dozen or more people are arriving by freight elevator, former anti-memetic division bodies. "I've found her," Not Kim calls out to them, and drops the ray gun where it's standing, and it simply forgets that it had been carrying. It pulls out its knife again. It holds the knife between two fingers, in a casual, off-handed sort of way, as if it were a pencil or a screwdriver. The infected non-people gather with Not Kim around Wheeler, looking down at her with alien expressions of disgust or pity or malice. "Why isn't she opening up properly?" someone asks. "She can't meet with them unless she wants the signals." "Start with her eyes," someone else says. "Make her easier to correct." Not Kim leans down and starts work, and then hesitates. His knife is a few centimeters from Wheeler's eye. She's whispering something, so quietly that it can only hear her clearly. None of this happened, Paul. You and I never existed. There is no Antimemetics division. There's a sharp click. The bomb finishes its powering up sequence. Nobody in the room can hear this but Wheeler. Nobody in the room can perceive the bomb but Wheeler. All they can see is an empty truck. The world goes black.